wouldn't have thought after doing The Facts of Life that things would have worked out quite this way. You know, I didn't think if you survive a mullet, you can survive anything, you know.
Coming up on this edition of Movie Star, a look at the career of Academy Award winner George Clooney.
There's a great advantage in everything happening much later. You know, you're a little more prepared for things.
George Clooney's road to fame was bumpy, but this full-fledged star takes it in stride. He's a director and producer who wants movies with meaning.
He can do romance, he can do comedy, he can do action, and drama. You know, so that's what it's really all about.
He was everything that you kind of hope your leading man is going to be.
George is like the kind of the best person to have around in any kind of tense situation because he'll always make you laugh.
He is so likable. He's just a really down-to-earth guy and just super fun, super nice. People he had the crew in stitches all the time. We just had a really good time.
He's known for putting co-stars at ease on the set and playing practical jokes on them. According to film historian Pete Hammond, Clooney's personality wins over movie audiences.
George Clooney's just an all-around good actor, but a fun guy. You get the sense when you're seeing a George Clooney movie, you see him in Ocean's 11 or something like that, that he's having a good time making that.
He was born George Timothy Clooney on May 6, 1961 in Lexington, Kentucky. His father, Nick Clooney, is a television talk show host.
My father was an anchorman, a newsman, wrote his own news for about 30 years, still writes for a newspaper.
Clooney's uncle was movie star Jose Ferrer. His aunt, singer-actress Rosemary Clooney. When George decided to try acting, he moved in with his famous aunt in Los Angeles.
The first year I lived there, and then moved in with a buddy of mine and kind of did all the same dumb things, you know, trying to get a job.
Honing his skills, Clooney studied acting. His first television series was a short-lived 1984 medical comedy.
Eventually landed a series called ER, the sitcom. That was my big break.
ER, the sitcom, starred Elliot Gould, who would later co-star with Clooney in Ocean's 11. ER only aired for one season. George followed with roles in Return to Horror High and Return of the Killer Tomatoes. In 1989, Clooney married actress Talia Balsam. 3 years later, he tried another television series, Bodies of Evidence, which was canceled after one season. Then Clooney had a small role as a transvestite in the thriller The Harvest. In 1993, George and Talia were divorced, and he vowed never to marry again. George was already at work on another series. It had the same title as his first sitcom, ER, but this medical drama would receive better results.
ER established him in the hearts and minds of the audience, so he had this huge base in this hugely successful television show to go with and take and follow him to the big screen and to go see his movies, and they did.
Clooney made the horror thriller From Dusk Till Dawn because he wanted to break away from the doctor character that made him famous on TV. Playing a tattooed criminal in this movie, written by Quentin Tarantino, seemed just the ticket.
And action!
They weren't expecting this side of George Clooney. He knew he had it in him, and he played this and he changed his hair and the whole thing. The ironic thing is he changed his hair, and that haircut became very popular. He wanted to do it so he could look kind of wild and crazy in this role. But it's Quentin Tarantino, it's Robert Rodriguez, it's all these hip and happening filmmakers right now, and it was a very bizarre movie, and so it brought a whole different audience. Believe me, the people that went to see that movie had not watched him on ER on a weekly basis. This was a whole different audience.
1 year later, George attended the One Fine Day premiere with girlfriend Celine Bellatrin. This romantic comedy co-stars Michelle Pfeiffer.
I was nervous about working with Michelle because, you know, yes, she's beautiful and she's a movie star. She's also a really good actor.
Call me on the mobile, and if you can't reach me, call 911.
Just kick the mean boys in the shins.
While making One Fine Day, George learned he won the lead in another movie.
While we were in rehearsal, Linda Opes, the producer, was sitting there next to Michelle, and she goes, "I heard you're doing Batman." And Michelle goes, "What are you doing in Batman?" And I said, "Batman." And then we all just sat in this thing and laughed, and we were like, oh, God.
In 1997, George Clooney and the cast of ER won a Screen Actors Guild Award, and he released Batman and Robin, directed by Joel Schumacher.
You take the stick and swing the guy,
right,
and the guy hits the other guy.
Okay.
It was very important to move Batman away from the dark, brooding, narcissistic, self-obsessed, my parents are dead, woe is me Batman. We've had almost 60 years of that. And George has, I mean, besides his great looks and his great acting ability, he's got an accessibility and a humor and a grace that I thought was particularly fresh.
Co-stars credited George for being lighthearted when he clowned with Chris O'Donnell and Mr. Freeze, Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I was saying, you know, that Arnold's arms were really only that big, this is just a con, it's all done with mirrors. And so he heard me and he said, you know, George, how you had all those muscles when you were Batman? Because I feel like that 24 hours a day.
While George hoped his hard work would lead to a Batman sequel, the movie was panned, and he jokingly claimed to have killed the Batman franchise. But it might not have been George's fault.
When you get down to the fourth or fifth movie in a franchise series, the quality starts to hurt. And I think by the time they got to the fourth Batman, it was really like tired. I think the studio wasn't as enthusiastic. They let the scripts just sort of fall apart, and it didn't really come in with a really good, compelling script. Or even for that matter, with Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze, a very compelling villain.
Not willing to let his career end with Batman, Clooney had another release in 1997, playing an army colonel who tracks down terrorists, with Nicole Kidman in The Peacemaker.
It's relevant and real, and it wasn't muddled by certain action mistakes like love scenes and too many jokes and any of the stuff that comes into play now when you're trying to make an action film. This was much more of a thriller and a much more of a suspense thriller, and I thought it was so well written. And then the character I loved. I loved this guy. I loved the idea that this is a guy, this is Jack Nicholson's character in A Few Good Men 15 years before.
The Peacemaker was the first movie released by DreamWorks. Co-star Nicole Kidman was pleased she didn't have to endure any Clooney pranks.
We had a truce. He wasn't allowed to do anything, otherwise I was going to get him back. So he still says that he agreed on the truce, but I still don't trust him. I live in fear.
No word on whether Clooney reached a similar truce with Jennifer Lopez for his next release, Out of Sight. But it was a jovial set.
Can I buy a drink?
He is so likable. He's just a really down-to-earth guy and just super fun, super nice. People just, he had the crew in stitches all the time.
The romantic thriller is based on an Elmore Leonard novel. Out of Sight was directed by Steven Soderbergh. It's the story of an escaped convict who falls in love with a U.S. Marshal.
George had everything that you need to be a big movie star, and I felt the last piece of the puzzle was a script that would allow him to do everything he can do, and I just think he delivered in this movie.
Oh my God.
One of the integral scenes in Out of Sight was filmed in the trunk of a car. Because of its importance to the movie, Jennifer and George did 45 takes. Out of Sight was produced by actor Danny DeVito, who attended the premiere with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I think it's very important that we support Danny DeVito with this project and George Clooney. They're both on the line here today. They're great entertainers, producers, and actors, and so we're here to support them.
Out of Sight was nominated for a Best Screenplay Oscar. Another 1998 release, The Thin Red Line, was an Academy Award Best Picture nominee. This drama, set during World War II, provided another chance for George to stretch himself as an actor. His next 1999 release was also dramatic.
The plan is for the gold, we stick to the plan. We're not thieves.
On the set of Three Kings, an action-adventure set during the Gulf War, George and co-star Mark Wahlberg became fast friends.
Mark Wahlberg, he's my good luck charm. I rub his head before I go out.
We spent like 5.5 months together in the desert, pretty much in the middle of nowhere, at least 2 hours away from civilization. For actors, it's pretty much unbearable.
Three Kings was released after Clooney aired his final appearance on ER, which was watched by more people than any other entertainment program that season. George's next movie release was another drama co-starring Mark Wahlberg. The Perfect Storm, the true story about an ill-fated commercial fishing trip, was a huge hit, earning more than $180 million in the U.S.
A hell of a crew and a hell of a skipper.
Twins Alec, Daniel, Billy, and Stephen have remained busy since Alec first broke into the entertainment business 24 years ago. But the brothers from New York